workers and union officials from power at the facility. It's the Hydra Corporation. And they submitted this to the National Right to Work Foundation. Mark Mix is the president, and he joins me this afternoon. Mark, good to have you.
Chris, good to be on with you. And while I wish they could submit it to us, we're just providing legal help to the employees that submitted the petition to the National Labor Relations Board.
Fair enough.
Which is
I appreciate that clarification. And of course, all of this comes as Michigan rolled back their right to work under the Whitmer administration. And so now what is Hydra Lock claiming here?
Yeah, what the employees are claiming, Hydra Lock, the employer has really nothing to do with this activity. This is the employees joining together, and a majority of them signed a petition to basically request a secret ballot election as to whether or not the union will still represent them in the workplace. It's called a decertification election. Usually when a union gets in, that's called certification. What these employees want to do is they want to get rid of the United Auto Workers Union in their facility that has been, quote unquote, representing them over the years. And they want to vote to prove that the majority of workers would no longer want the UAW to represent them in the workplace.
And did this come to a head after Michigan reverted back in the right to work decision?
Yeah, Chris, this is one of several of these that we've helped employees in Michigan navigate this legal process to get out of the union. Because once the right to work law was repealed, what was in most union contracts, I would suggest probably almost all union contracts, what was known as a union security clause. And that union security clause, it said that every employee in this particular business that had been unionized, whether these workers voted for it or not, and in fact, most workers have never voted for the union that represents them because these elections occurred 30, 40, 50 years ago. For the UAW at Chrysler and Ford, it was 1937 when they accepted unionization there. So, but what they did is they got together and said, we want to have a vote, a secret ballot election. The NLRB should conduct that. The regional office up in Detroit, Region 7, should conduct this election and let the employees vote on whether or not the union will retain this monopoly representation privilege over them. So that's what's going on here. It's not an easy process. If the employer is involved in it in any way, the union will file an unfair labor practice charge, and this NLRB, this National Labor Relations Board, will likely block the ability for these workers to have the vote. But they hopefully will get this exercise. And the one thing, Chris, they have to thread the needle. They have to thread this needle between 90 days to 60 days of the expiration of what should be probably a 3-year contract. They have to get that just right to even have this election. So we're helping them navigate that process, and hopefully they'll get an election and their will be done as those votes are counted.
And so what is specifically the gripe here of the workers? Is it just that they don't want union leadership there? Is there some underlying issue that they've had? What specifically are they claiming?
Yeah, they're just saying that the union hasn't been a good representative of them in the workplace, and they think they might be able to be better on their own. And again, that union security clause that I mentioned after the repeal of right to work forces these workers to pay union dues or fees in order to keep their jobs. If they don't pay union dues, then they will be fired by the employer. It's a requirement of the contract. The union will say, you have to fire Chris because he hasn't tendered his dues this month and he has to go. So that may be part of it. The representational piece might be part of it. The fact that the UAW has been under investigation, is still under a federal monitor today because of the corruption, as you probably well reported on 2 or 3 years ago when a couple of their presidents went to jail for racketeering and extortion and stealing money. I mean, workers have lots of different reasons, but primarily the one is they're not getting the representation that the union promised them probably at the beginning of this process.
And so now lay out the timeline for me here. You talked about the National Labor Relations Board and their role in this, and now the UAW's role in this too. But now that a majority of the employees have submitted this, now what happens next?
Yeah, what will happen is the regional office will review the petition. They'll probably verify that these people are actually working in the plant, that there is more than 30% of the workers that signed the petition, because that's the minimum threshold to trigger this process of decertification. But in this case, the majority of workers in the workplace that are represented by the union have signed the petition saying they want to have this vote. So the regional director will verify the petition, and then hopefully they will conduct the election. They will schedule an election in the workplace, and the workers will be able to cast a ballot in private on yes or no, should the union stay here and represent us. And hopefully the NLRB will process that vote, They will then certify the vote, and then the union will be removed from the workplace, and the employers will be free to negotiate again with the employer without the union in the middle of that process.
You mentioned that there were several companies in the state of Michigan going through something similar. What similarities are there to Hydra Lock, and what differences are there in some of these cases?
Well, Chris, that's a great question. We've had people on the west side over in Grand Rapids and Holland, Michigan. We've had truck drivers. We've had security agents. We've had all kinds of people that have called us. And in fact, I think the number of decertification petitions that we've been helping employees with in Michigan has doubled since the repeal of the right to work law. And basically what I think is the growing awareness is all of a sudden their paycheck comes back, and there's a deduction of $50 or whatever it is per month that comes right out of their paycheck that didn't happen before the right to work bill was repealed. When right to work was in place, they could give the money to the union. Nobody was stopped from giving money to the union, but now it's showing up again. And then once you have that value proposition of this money coming out of your paycheck, you say, what have they done for me, and what do they continue to do for me? And I think lots of employees find that wanting as it relates to this case trying to remove the UAW.
You talked about some of the hurdles, whether it's with the NLRB or the UAW, and they make it difficult to take this next step. What is the rate in which these things happen based on some of the cases that you've seen either in Michigan or around the state of being successful?
Yeah. Well, once we get through the process, they're generally successful because it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to stand up and say, we want to have this vote. I mean, because the intimidation sometimes gets very dramatic in the workplace. The union has an interest in this. But what will happen here probably is the union will file an unfair labor practice charge. They'll say that the employer put them up to this, and they'll ask the NLRB to block the election until these allegations, some can be true, some aren't true, some are just because regular, ordinary, standard operating procedure is to file a complaint against the employer, which would stop the process. That's likely what will happen here.
Interesting stuff. Mark Mix, thanks for your time. Really appreciate it.